Hey everybody, my name is Ryan Doyle. This is the Verdigris Table, where I teach you how to play Dungeons & Dragons, become a better player, and eventually take your turn behind the DM screen. Today, we are talking ability scores. I like to think of ability scores as your character's DNA. It's what makes them, to a large degree, what they are, what they're good at, what they excel at, what their weaknesses are. So strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma are the big six in D&D 5th edition. Strength represents your character's physical bodily power, how far they can jump, their athleticism, how hard they're going to hit with most weapons. If you're trying to move a heavy object or shove somebody off of a cliff or break restraints that are holding you down, strength is what you're going to be using to do that. Dexterity is also physical, but is more your agility, how good you are at more acrobatic type skills, sneaking around, also like fine motor skills, right? Sleight of hand, picking a lock would be dexterity. It's also kind of like your response time, your reflexes. So your ability to get out of the way of danger a lot of the time, a falling rock or a trap springing. It's also going to determine your modifier to your initiative, so how quickly you react in danger. Constitution rounds out the physical three abilities, and I always think of it as like health and hardiness. Your constitution is going to go into determining how many hit points you have, how much health your character has, how much damage they can sustain while staying on their feet. It's also going to help you resist poison, right, or other, physical bodily effects. That's going to be Constitution save. Constitution is also going to go a long way towards your ability to concentrate on spells in particular. Some spells require concentration. If you take damage, then it's Constitution. It's your physicality. We often forget when we're building a caster that, or whatever in real life, that our brain is part of our body and Constitution goes into concentration. So don't forget about it, you casters out there. Intelligence, I often describe as education, but it's also analytical ability, right? If you want to investigate a room and deduce what happened there, like Sherlock Holmes, that's intelligence. Also, just, pure knowledge recall. Do you want to try to see if your character knows some historical fact or religious fact or, a fact regarding magic and arcana? That's going to be an intelligence check as well. Wisdom I like to think of as awareness, and it often gets confused for intelligence in D&D and in real life. So if intelligence is logic, then wisdom is going to be intuition. The lines often get blurry at the table, and there's plenty of arguments online and at the table about whether, medicine or nature should be intelligence or wisdom-based. But if you're trying to spot somebody who's hiding or sneaking up on you, or you're trying to suss out if they're lying to you in conversation, that's wisdom. Wisdom also has this overlap kind of with like willpower, the ability to control your awareness is how I think of it. But there's a lot of spells out there that try to charm you or take your willpower away, and oftentimes it's a wisdom saving throw to protect yourself from that. Charisma is what you'd be using if you were trying to convince your dungeon master to let you use wisdom or intelligence for nature or investigation or medicine or whatever the case may be. Charisma is persuasiveness. So if you were trying to convince somebody to do something, be it through, persuasive arguments or through intimidation or through pure deceit, that would all be charisma. High charisma score makes for a good leader. It also makes for a good liar. And yes, occasionally those are different things. There is the classic tomato example for the 6 ability scores, and I'm not going to read it out right now because I had a lot of trouble kind of figuring out exactly where the source was. I found this Reddit thread from about 7 years ago, and that seems to be the earliest incarnation that I could find. I'm going to put this cartoon up. I can tell you that Max Marcel made this, so at least I can give credit for it. It's fun, and I think it does a pretty good job. I will say that I think it makes a Bard joke and kind of misses the mark on wisdom in the process, but hey, there you go. That's Bards for you. Now, as we level up, we'll get opportunity to improve upon these ability scores, and whatever, race we choose is going to have an impact on what our ability scores are out of the gate. But in character creation, there's a few ways to generate these statistics. The old school way, the original way of generating these ability scores is by rolling 4d6, 4 six-sided die, and you drop the lowest number, so the 3 remaining faces are your score there. So a minimum of, well, 3 in this case, and a maximum of 18. If you want to be hardcore, or you're just running a one-shot and you want the dice to tell you what kind of character you are playing, then you can insert those scores in order, right? So the first thing you roll is going to be your strength, all the way down through to the last number that you get is going to be your charisma score. Typically, you're going to generate the 6 numbers and then put them where you want, because depending on what kind of class you are rolling up, you're going to want, your highest number and your most important stat, be it intelligence for a wizard, or wisdom for a druid, or strength for a barbarian. There are a million homebrew variations of rolling for stats. You can roll a d20 if you want to get crazy. There's a million, ways to kind of cook the books. And I roll 66 and drop the lowest 3, and why not just put 18 for all the slots? Whatever. Whatever your table decides, I'm sure is fine. I know one variation that I'm partial to is everybody contributes to the pool of stats. So there's one group of numbers that everyone rolls together. Either everybody rolls a d6 and that gets added up, or everybody rolls for one number, or it depends how many players are at the table. But having everybody share the same stats and then insert them into whatever ability they like is a good way to add that random number generator gambling aspect to the game while keeping things fair. Another option for getting your ability scores, and one I like for beginners because it's quick and it's easy and I use it a lot myself anyway, is by taking the standard array, which is on page 13 of the player's handbook. If you don't have a copy yet, there's a link down below. But yeah, 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. You take that standard array of numbers and you insert them where you want in those 6 abilities. My preferred method of generating ability scores, the one that I use in my table, is point buy. Also there on the player's handbook page 13, you have 27 points. Every ability score costs a different amount of points. It's a little complicated at first glance, but it's the best way of doing things in my opinion, because whether or not you want to create a very balanced character or you want to totally min-max out your character, you can do it with point buy. One quick tip, you can actually take the standard array, which is, you can derive standard array scores from the point buy method. I'll often start with standard array because it does create this nice balanced character, and then I will tinker from there. I will remove points from one and free up some spending money to put into other stats. I find that is the quickest way to create my character. If you prefer to just start from 0 and 8s across the board and spend your points, then cool, go for it. But yeah, I like taking the standard array and then tinkering using the point buy method to make my character most of the time. Now, the reason I like point buy as a dungeon master, beyond just as a player, as a dungeon master, I like point buy at the table because it creates a fair playing field for everybody. You can argue that rolling is fair because everybody has the same odds. But, over time, maybe you do get your 18 in your key stat and you're getting +2 from your race. And now, boom, you're coming in at level 1 with +7 to hit, right? Awesome for you. But if your friend beside you did not have the same luck and they're rolling with, +3, and they just, rolled up a dud of a character and are secretly hoping to die, then they're having a lot less fun. So even if you're having an amazing time and your character is crazy good, that's actually creating more of a contrast for how bad they've rolled. And I don't know, I've been in that situation and it's no fun for everybody. One is the DM when you're trying to balance encounters for these wildly different structured characters. But 2, as a player, whether or not, obviously when you're working with a bad character statistically, right? I mean, there's some interest in that, right? I like having weak stats to roleplay, but when I'm bad at the things I'm supposed to be good at, because my dice told me, no, you get a 9 here, you know, that's less fun to play. But that's just my opinion. Your mileage may vary. All of these are equally valid ways of doing it. So yeah, however you get your ability scores, you're going to get the opportunity to improve upon them every few levels. You know, there's feat variation rules. Different classes get different ability score improvements at different times, generally speaking. But yeah, you're going to have the opportunity to improve upon your score, even if you rolled poorly, or you know, things just didn't quite work out in the point buy, and well, whatever. You're gonna have an opportunity to improve on these things. It's a lot like DNA, except you get to change it every 4 levels or so. All right, so once we have our ability scores, however we generate them, we're going to use them to get our ability score modifiers. So that's, you know, that 10 sitting there in your strength box is really going to become a plus or minus 0 in that case. A 12 is +1. And I find this is where a lot of people's eyes glaze over. Okay, we're going to get one number and we use that number to get another number, and this is starting to feel suspiciously like math homework. And I'm here to tell you, it's no big deal. You do it one time. It's on page 13 on the player's handbook. There's a little chart. There's no calculating involved. But it's the modifier. It's that plus or minus, whatever the number may be, that you're going to be using at the table to determine everything else. Your skills and your saves, your to hit and your passive perception, your initiative. It's all coming from the modifier, not from the raw skill itself. So you can subtract 10 from your ability score, divide it by 2, and round down. And that'll give you the modifier. When in doubt, in D&D, we always round down. Remember that. But yeah, so your 13 becomes 3 divided by 2 is 1.5, and round down. Okay, so +1. Your 8 becomes -2. Divided by 2 is -1, would be the modifier there. So pretty simple. I know for a lot of us, math can seem scary and intimidating, and I blame our education system for making that the case. But yeah, you don't have to do any math. Go on to page 13 of the player's handbook, or here. Here is the chart. Simple, easy. Find your stat, input the modifier, and that's the thing that you're going to be looking for in the rest of character creation and at the table playing the game. It's important to remember that all of this stuff on the character sheet is an abstraction. It's a lens to make the rules work while you're playing the game. So I'm going to suggest not getting too caught up in what, you know, facet of the six-sided prism, whatever thing you're trying to do is. You know, if you're DMing, then you make the call, be it a charisma thing or a wisdom thing, and go from there. You know, if a player makes a persuasive argument, then yes, maybe you allow them to use one ability or the other. If you're a player, honestly, I would suggest defer to the DM. It's not the end of the world if you pass or fail most things. If it's a death saving throw, okay, it might be the end of the world for your character. But for the most part, yes, defer to your DM. If you really have an issue with how they're making the call, then talk to them after the game, because there's nothing like debating rules for 5 minutes to kind of slow the pace of the storytelling or the combat or whatever else you may be into. So that's it for ability scores. With those 6 numbers, we are going to figure out pretty much everything else on the character sheet in conjunction with proficiency. I find proficiency kind of trips people up more than the ability scores. You know, that six-sided prism of how we see every ability in D&D kind of makes sense for people. The lines get blurry sometimes, but intuitively we get it. Proficiency, I find not so much. So in the next video, we're going to talk about that real quick. Until then, get out there, have fun, be kind, and I'll see you next time.